Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason, how's your Halloween going?
It's pretty good. I think we haven't had any kids for a few minutes now, probably maybe a good half hour. So I think that's probably the end of it for tonight. But I think we had a pretty good turnout overall. How about you?
It was pretty quiet, but so was last year. I think we had about 23 or 24 kids in total. And, that's only 9 or 10 groups coming to our door. So we definitely have a surplus of candy left over, but I'm not going to complain about that. I'll have some treats to add to my lunches every day for a week or two.
So we're not here to talk about Halloween candy. We're here to talk about soccer. So if you are a new listener to our podcast, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
Yeah, 75 episodes in, another milestone for us. But the YYC Soccer Podcast is all about soccer in Calgary. We talk about it at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels, discussing the teams and the players from the city's soccer community, all the way from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university and professional teams.
And this week on the agenda, we're going to talk about Cavalry FC and their big victory in Hamilton against Forge. We're going to talk about the Calgary Wild. They've made some big announcements in their front office and football operations staff. We'll talk about that. Also do some updates about the various local teams that are in university and college playoff action. And we will also have an interview this week. Scott, who's our interview with this week?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the Calgary Wild made some announcements regarding their first player as well as their executive team and kind of like backroom or front room staff. So we had the privilege of interviewing Alix Bruch recently. She's the new sporting director for the Calgary Wild.
Yeah, it was a really good in-depth conversation about some things to expect on the pitch this upcoming season. So pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about running that interview. I think right now, let's start off with Cavalry FC and their big victory in Hamilton.
Hi, this is Tobias Waszewski. You're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So Cavalry came away with the big 1-0 win at Tim Hortons Field. Our most recent podcast guest, Toby Warshevsky, scored the all-important goal for Cavalry to win this one. I really enjoyed watching this game, Jason. I felt like maybe it wasn't as exciting as the York-Ottawa game that happened right before it, but there was some good soccer going on the pitch.
That's what I thought. I thought it was a really entertaining game. Like, even though we only had one goal, there was a lot of action. There was some back and forth play. It was pretty even. And I think I remember at one point in this match, I thought, even if you're a neutral, I think you'd be enjoying this match.
It was a good advertisement for the Canadian Premier League. And that's exactly what you'd expect from these two teams. Is a great battle right until the end. Even a few minutes out, I wasn't feeling all that confident that Cavalry was going to hold on, just considering the quality of Forge. And it is exciting to me to think that these two teams could actually play each other again just over a week from now. But we'll talk about that in a second. I'd like to mention Warshevsky's goal. I was really impressed with it. Big punt up the pitch from Marco Carducci. Toby did a great job bringing this down, wrestling off, I think it was 2 Forge defenders, touching the ball, despite, it being kind of in an awkward placement around Forge's goalkeeper and then knocking it in. This goal is probably harder to score than most fans realize.
It seemed very difficult, and he was kind of tangled up with some players there, and he was able to work his way through that. And then, once he was through that, then the end part was easy tapping it in, but it was that part right before that, not so easy.
Yeah, but even the shot in, I mean, the goalkeeper was off his line at this point, but it was still a fairly acute angle. And if he had gone for the far post, I think there was a Forge player who maybe could have got the block. But yeah, it was a really impressive goal. And it was all Cavalry needed, as we've talked about. Their defense is so strong that if they they've conceded a lot of leads, and we've talked about that a lot. But they are good at shutting up shop when they need to. And this is what they did in this game for pretty much the entire second half.
Yeah, I thought they managed Forge's high power attack very effectively. Like, obviously, Forge had chances and everything like that. I thought that when they had to play, they had to make defensive plays. They were well organized and they kept their shape and performed well.
Absolutely, they can be really pleased with this. Of course, it books them a spot in the CPL Championship game, which is going to take place in Calgary at Atco Field on November 9th. So Cavalry gets to host the final for the first time since the inaugural season in 2019. And they will take on the winner of this weekend's game between Forge and Atletico Ottawa.
Yeah, it should be a good match. It'll be pretty interesting to see how that one plays out. But yeah, whoever it ends up being, it should be a good match in a week and a bit. We'll do a more in-depth preview of the final match in our next episode.
Hi, this is Grace Doherty, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Now let's move over to the Calgary Wild, and we'll talk about some of the new announcements they've made in regards to players, ownership, front office staff. There's been a flurry of announcements over the last week or so.
Yeah, they've kind of come thick and fast. And listeners will probably recall last week we speculated who their first player was going to be, as well as who that mystery NHL player who is going to be investing and part owning the team was going to be. And we got one of those predictions right, Jason, but we were very far off with one of them as well.
Yeah, like right now, if you said you can have 50 guesses on who the first Wild signing would be, I don't think I would have selected this person who was the first signing, but that doesn't make it any less cool. It's kind of interesting. It's just not expected, I think.
Definitely. So the first player announced was Farkhunda Muhtaj. She did grow up in Canada, but has ties to Afghanistan and is actually captain of the Afghan women's national team and has been very actively involved with women's sport advocacy in that country. And I think she did a lot of really important work in 2021 when the Taliban took over Afghanistan again. No, as I mentioned, she has spent a lot of time in Canada. She grew up in the Toronto area after moving to Canada as quite young. Formerly played with York University, as well as with League One Ontario teams like Vaughan Azzurri and Durham United. But most recently, she's been playing professionally in the Netherlands in the women's Eredivisie with a team called Fortuna Sittard. So she's bringing some European experience to the fold as Calgary Wild's first player.
Yeah, she's definitely got a good resume and pedigree. I think I just kind of presumed it was going to be someone with Calgary connections. That's why I think it was a bit of a surprise for me. But it's a pretty good signing nonetheless, and I think she'll be a valuable member of the Wild, like probably both on and off the pitch.
Yeah, and she's 1997 born, which puts her at, I believe, 27 years of age, if maybe 26. But that's, right in the prime of your career, usually. So I'm excited to see what kind of leadership role or like what her role with the team will be. I believe she's a midfielder. We'll see who the next players to be signed are. Hopefully those announcements will come pretty fast. As for the prediction we did get right, we were spot on that Josh Morrissey of the Winnipeg Jets was going to be a part owner of the team alongside his wife.
As we discussed last week, I think when we just looked at the timing, that just seemed to make sense. So
as mentioned, Alix Bruch, native Calgarian, former St. FX player, and former professional in Europe who has played in the UEFA Women's Champions League. She was announced as the sporting director for the Calgary Wild just a few days ago. So Jason, I had to dip a little bit early in this interview, unfortunately. But I know you got to ask her a lot more questions after I took off. But really good chat between you two and talking all kinds of things about what fans should expect with the Wild this season.
We covered a lot of ground, about what to expect on the pitch. Like there's been, lots of talk about the league and in sort of a very, general sense about things to expect. But we kind of got a little bit more into the weeds and into the details about things to expect, style of play and types of players they're looking for. And I'll let the interview speak for itself. But I think that if you're looking for some more detailed answers from what's going to happen on the pitch point of view, we got some answers.
Yeah, so I think we should run that interview now and let Alix talk about all kinds of things related to the Calgary Wild. I'd like to welcome Alix Bruch to the podcast. Alix is the new sporting director for the Calgary Wild FC, and she brings an extensive soccer background and playing career to the role. Alix, thank you very much for joining us on our podcast this week.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we always like to ask our interview guests to kind of give a bit of their background. We understand you grew up in Calgary, but can you talk a little bit about that and then your playing career?
As you said, I grew up in Calgary, played for Rangers from when I was a kid. My dad coached me, and I played for a lot of clubs growing up. I played at Calgary Storm when they existed, when I was around 10. I actually listened to your podcast the other day about them, which was cool. Chinook, Southwest United. And yeah, the time came to go to university, and I ended up choosing St. FX, which is on the total opposite side of the country over in Nova Scotia. Spent 4 years there, had an incredible experience, and returned home because that's what we did at the time. There was no pathway to go anywhere else. So I came home and I started my career as a geologist, which is what I went to school for. But pretty quickly, realized I don't think that was the right fit for me. I was really missing sport. I was missing the team energy and that competitive drive. It was really missing in my life. So I ended up going back on this crazy journey to pursue a professional career. It was around the time of the 2015 World Cup in Canada, which was sort of what relit that fire in me. So I ended up going back to St. FX. My old coach there, Graham Kennedy, convinced me to do one more season. I think I was 24 at the time. So I returned for the season to get back in top shape and playing regularly. And we won our conference championship for only the third time in team history. So that was a huge accomplishment for us. And from there, it was difficult. I wish I could say I just landed a contract, but at the time it was quite hard to get abroad. And so I stitched my own highlight video together. I sent it to hundreds of teams all across the world. Got a lot of responses, but it's really difficult for someone without a European passport to land a spot. And so I actually played a season here in Calgary with the UWS. It was the very first year that Foothills had that franchise. Was playing against top players, and I got myself an agent, and then it happened really quickly. I got the call to get on a plane to go to Serbia, and that was it. So I had a professional career, and it was amazing getting to play in the Champions League. Inevitably was forced away due to some health stuff. But since then, I've continued to work in the game and be a champion for pathways for women in the game.
How did you end up having the opportunity to join the Wild, and why did you decide to take this position?
I started my own soccer agency. So I was working as an agent for 3 or 4 years leading up to this. It was based on myself having that struggle of getting to the professional level. But in the back of my mind, when I started that, I knew that I really wanted to work for a club. I really wanted to work in the professional game. And of course, at the time, there was no pathway to do that in Canada. And I didn't want to, move across the pond over to Europe. So I kind of took that time as, a learning experience. I could learn as much as I can about the professional game and, the inner workings of FIFA and the transfer market, which is something I think most people don't know that much about. So I was kind of patiently waiting, thinking, maybe there's going to be a league in Canada coming. And sure enough, 2022, it came to be. Project 8 was announced. And so I got in touch with Deanna, who's our exec chair, first spring 2023, and just kind of started a conversation and a relationship. And I was living in Halifax at the time, so it was a little bit tough to, really get plugged in. But I was there as a resource mostly, kind of as they got things going. And then I moved to Calgary in October last year. So that's when I really, got plugged in with the team. I was still working as an agent. I still had a full-time job. but I was really excited about this. And so, yeah, I mean, I've been working with the team for about a year on a volunteer basis, and it felt like a natural transition to take this role with the team.
Awesome. And speaking of your role specifically, your title is sporting director. Can you outline what exactly your responsibilities and role will be? I understand there's probably an element of player recruitment or being almost like an agent, like your former position, but also working with coaching staff. So can you kind of outline what exactly you'll be doing with the Wild?
The sporting director role is very common in Europe. I think it's newly being introduced here in North America. It's a really interesting and really exciting role. You kind of sit on the sporting side of the club, but it toes the line of technical and more operational and business, which I really gravitate to mixed roles of that sort. And so I lead our scouting and recruitment efforts from identification of the player through the contract negotiation and into the signing, which of course is kind of the flip of the agent role. I maintain a very large network of agents, players, clubs, coaches. So we have a good awareness of the players that are in the market. That too, just general knowledge of the transfer market is really important in this role. So my agent work it's come handy as we get things going here, as I'm really familiar with FIFA regulations and everything. And additionally, I'll be working closely with our coaching staff, developing our club sporting strategy, working with our integrated support team, which will be, medical, physio, nutrition, mental performance, just making sure our players are well taken care of. Finally, working on our development pathway. So working with our academy coaches to build out our academy and pathway to the first team.
You have one signing announced so far, and I'm going to presume that there's probably more than one player signed at this point. They're just not officially announced. Well, we'd love to get a scoop, but I'm guessing that's probably not going to happen. But can you give us an idea about how far along you are, like with the signing player process, and also on the same token, like what we can expect for announcements?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working kind of quietly on this since the spring. I know despite what's in the public, we've signed one player, but we have signed more. We've signed a good chunk so far. And a lot of these conversations started quite early. And that's mostly due to international transfer windows. Every country, every club, they work on different timelines. We're going to operate on the same timeline as the NWSL, which is kind of a April to November season. But in Europe, they're on more of a August, September to May, June timeline. So a lot of these players that we wanted to get early, we wanted to get them before they signed with a club in Europe in September. As I said, we've signed a few so far, but I'm not going to share any names on this, but we will be announcing over the month of November. So there'll be a lot of exciting players announced that fans can get behind.
Are you able to give us an idea on how wide of a net you've casted as like a scouting network? Like, will we be seeing more players from international leagues, or will fans see names they might recognize from Canadian university teams or League One teams, for instance?
Yeah, we cast a very wide net. For the inaugural season, we're building a team entirely from scratch. So that means, we're looking for 22 to 25 players, and that's no small feat, especially when you're dealing with players that, are under contracts already. Maybe they're still in school. There's a lot of barriers, you might say. So our strategy, is to really lean into experience in year one. This league, the NSL, and all of the clubs, we're aligned in that we want this to be a top 5 league. That is the goal. So that puts us in the company of the NWSL, the WSL in England, the Bundesliga, the Spanish league. And if you look at the players in those leagues, it's an incredibly high standard. So, if we're serious about that goal, we need to be attracting, the best players. So, of course, we're not going to be there year one, but our recruitment has been focused on bringing Canadians home who have been playing abroad for a number of years. We want to bring in players that know what it means to be a pro. They have multiple years under their belt. They come in and they lead and they set the standard. We are also looking to bring in international players. Each club can have up to 7. So we've signed a couple already. We're in talks with others who are very high caliber players. There will also be some local talent in the mix, as it's important to invest in our system here. And of course, I think the community will recognize some of those names. And then we'll look to incorporate a small number of new graduates. The first year, I think it'll be smaller, just because they haven't been exposed to the professional game. A professional season is 10 months long. It's a very big jump. And that said, we're also committed to building out our academy program. So I think down the road over the years, you'll see more and more players kind of come up through our system into the first team.
One of the things that's been mentioned so far is that there will be a marquee player rule where it's one player outside the salary cap. Is there a plan for the Wild to have a marquee player? Is that something every team's going to have? Are you expecting that the Wild will have one, even if you don't have one yet?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think each team is approaching that differently. You don't need to have a marquee player. You don't need to have a designated player. I know some are calling it designated player, some are calling it marquee player, and it sort of depends what your strategy is. The designated player, they don't hit our salary cap, which is huge. That means that we can, pay a player a very good salary, and it doesn't impact our ability to build out the rest of a roster. So looking at it from that way, I think we will be using a designated player. We have not determined who that will be. We're taking our time a little bit on it to see what the options are. I know that a lot of people want to see Canadian national team players in this league, and certainly we are in talks, and we are seeing who's available, who's interested. And so it's a bit hard to say in year one what that'll look like. And I can't speak for other teams either. On who they are bringing in.
Can we talk about plans regarding like playing style and strategy? Like what kind of team are you hoping to field? Like what kind of tactics we can expect?
I can say that we want to have some consistency with our reserve team, which is that UWS Foothills team. We've now moved that under the Wild umbrella, and we're building out, as I said, the academy pathway below that. So we are looking to have consistency from top to bottom, and we really like how that team has been playing, that UWS team. And it's possession based, it's attacking style, it's fast paced. It's a really nice brand of soccer. And so we're looking to keep that in the first team. And we're looking for players that fit that. They're very good technically, but more so they're able to make decisions quickly and play under pressure. The biggest jump, I would say, from semi-pro or university or UWS to the professional game is the speed of play. So if you're, the best player on your team technically, you need to be able to do that at speed, at pace, under pressure. So we're looking to, bring in players that can do that can execute and can play at a high level right away. And once we get a head coach in the mix, things will shift slightly, and we'll nail down, more of our game model and our tactics a bit more thoroughly. But for right now, we're recruiting players that are adaptable and flexible, and can step in and, change things on the fly because they have the skill to do so.
What about the pursuit of finding a head coach right now and a coaching staff? Like how much of the technical staff is fleshed out? And really when it comes right down to it, 4 months or so from training camp? So even though I'm guessing you're not going to toss out any names, how fleshed out is it?
Yeah, it's our priority right now. I can say that. We've been collecting resumes for quite a while, and we've been having conversations with a lot of coaches, and we did post it formally as well to cast as wide a net as possible. We're really looking to bring in a coach that has significant experience coaching, and we also want to bring in some Canadian talent as well, whether it's the head coach or the assistant level. So right now we haven't hired anybody, but we're hoping to have that wrapped up in a month or a little more than a month, I would say. It's, obviously a very big decision for us for our first year, the inaugural coach. It'll be a very important hire for us. And we're also working behind the scenes on the support team. So that's kind of the strength and conditioning, nutrition, physio. We're going to be outsourcing that. So we're going to be partnering with local sports organizations that already work in that field, and utilizing their facilities and their expertise. So we have a plan and it's set. It's just a matter of bringing in the head coach and our assistant coach so that we can get it all plugged in together.
I want to talk about player pathways. Now, you mentioned about the connection between the Foothills, the UWS side, and also I believe that it was announced that the high performance team that played in League One Alberta last year is going to fall under the Wild umbrella as well. So can you talk a little bit about how these teams are going to be connected and in what way? And then I guess also, how connected is the Wild going to be with sort of the Foothills grassroots program? Like, just give us an impression of what that all looks like.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. As you said, that high performance program is under the Wild umbrella. We have Greg DeCarnis, who's going to be our kind of academy lead there. And we want this to be for the province. This isn't, just a one club team. And so there will be representation from all the clubs across Calgary and some in Edmonton as well on that team to make sure, we're giving equal opportunity across this province for players to go to the next level. And we want to make sure we're developing players across the province and not just from one club. Foothills has done a lot to get us here. They were the initial ones that got at this franchise. They have an incredible history of developing players, and we want to continue that legacy in Calgary.
As far as preseason, when actually are you expecting it to start? Like, I'm presuming sometimes in March. Is that right? What's kind of the timing there?
Yeah, we're looking at February. We want as much time as possible to get the players here, get them comfortable. They can get to know each other. It's different than teams that have been operating for a while, that they have kind of a core coming back. We're going to have over 20 brand new faces here. So we want as much time for them to gel, get used to the elevation. That is one thing that we've noted is, it's going to be an obstacle for players here, although we're hoping it'll turn into a competitive advantage for us. But yeah, looking at kind of early to mid-February to get going.
Sort of like looking at the big picture for this first season, like what do you think the Wild need to achieve to consider the first season a success, say, on the pitch?
Yeah, something that, we talk about this with our team, and we want to be successful 3, 4, 5 years down the road. We're looking to be sustainable. And so, that's looking, beyond year one. So year one, we want to make sure that, we're setting the standard that, we're offering the best services to our players and supporting them the best that we can, so that we can, keep players coming back and recruit more. I think that this first year, it's going to be very public. People will be looking at us, how we're running things. How does the league do? How does the club do? So we want to start out on really good footing. And I think that means bringing in great people on our staff, bringing in, great players, but also great people. That's something we've been really focused on our recruitment, is bringing in players that we think will gel, players that are really driven and committed to our vision as a club and want to help grow the game in Canada. So I think we'd call it a success, if we finish top 2 in the table, that is a goal for us. But also that players have a good experience and they're proud to be part of the Wild.
What message would you like to give fans, listeners out there as you embark on this first season in the league?
Yeah, our fans and the community, that's a huge part of this. We need them to support us and get behind us. This is a brand new franchise. Women's sports they're having such a moment, and it's a movement, really across Canada and North America. So, we want fans to come along for that ride and to know that they're a part of this. And we are working in a lot of ways to reach the community and, make sure that they have access to attending our games and getting to know our club. And we're really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to, people showing up, in our first home game and being excited to support our players on the field.
Is there anything else that you want to mention or add? I think we've kind of run through all the questions we want, but I think we always want to give our guests an opportunity to add in anything else you want to mention?
I think you covered a lot of things I was thinking about. Yeah, I mean, I guess I appreciate what you guys do here, and getting a local podcast going. I think it's really important for fans in the community to have these sorts of spaces to connect, and it's such a big part of sport to speculate on who's going to be on a team and chat about all things soccer, which that's what we're here for, right? It's all about community and enjoying the game together.
Thanks again very much. We appreciate your time doing this. And, we're going to be following along with great interest, and probably be checking back from time to time to get some more updates.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to keep in touch. We have more announcements coming in the next few weeks. So there'll be lots to talk about. Thanks
once more to Alix for doing the interview. Scott, anything you want to add? Any comments? Anything in that interview that was a little bit surprising, or something that you think we should discuss further?
I think the fact that they're going to be, or they have been, signing players without a head coach is surprising. If you think about it, that means that whoever they do sign as head coach won't have maybe that much influence in selecting the roster. But overall, it's they're clearly they've got a direction, they've got a plan in place. I'm excited to see who the next players signed are. And it's really important and key, and I'm glad to see that they are creating a pretty visible player pipeline right from the grassroots up to the Calgary Wild. So there will be, like a logical pathway for players at the top level in Calgary and Alberta to follow if playing for the Wild is their ultimate goal.
One thing I thought was interesting in the interview was we talk about bringing experience right off the bat. Like, this is not going to be a team full of young kids. It's going to be, if you say compared to say CPL, like Cavalry or some of the other teams in the CPL, there's always been a higher focus on really young players, but it doesn't really sound like that is going to be as much of a focus right off the bat. Like when you look at the first signing and then just even the comments that were made in the interview, like they're looking for experienced pros. They're looking for, a more experienced coach.
No, yeah, I got that out of it too. And I mean, I don't think, at first I was thinking like NSL is kind of going to be like the CPL in the sense that it's going to provide a platform for players who haven't had the opportunity to play professionally. But maybe it could be more like, another comparison could be the old CSL from the 1980s and 90s, which was branded as being, let's bring Canada's best players back home. They've been playing in the States, or they've been trying to forge careers out in Europe, but let's give them an opportunity to play in their hometowns in front of their families. This was before MLS. So you saw a lot of Canadian national team players in the old CSL. And maybe that's what we'll see happen with the NSL on the women's side. That would be really neat, I think.
And I'm still going to speculate. Some of those players that we mentioned in a few episodes back, if there are other players signed for the Wild, I would not be surprised if they are Talia White, Grace Doherty, Sarah Kinsner. They've sort of fall into the category of the kind of player that I think we're talking about. Yeah, we'll see. And the other thing that surprised me in this interview a little bit is how early training camp's going to start. Like, we don't have that long to wait. It's going to be early February.
Yeah, early February. And that gives them a lot of time to prepare and mesh and build some chemistry. So that's February, March, April, 3 months, I guess, to get all their ducks in a row.
Well, it's going to be interesting, and we'll keep following along. So thanks again to Alix for taking the time to do the interview.
Hi, this is Aislinn Phillips, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, let's talk about post-secondary soccer in Calgary now. We got some local teams won their opening playoff match and advanced in their playoff postseason run, and then other teams faltered in the playoffs, unfortunately. Let's start by talking about the University of Calgary Dinos women's, who beat the University of British Columbia Okanagan Heat 1-0 last Friday to advance to the Canada West Championships, which they will be hosting at McMahon Stadium this weekend.
Pretty exciting to have them come through and win that match. Like, they were playing the fourth place team on the Pacific Conference, so and had home field advantage. So you're there was an expectation, I think, to a point that the chances of advancing were good, but yeah, and now we get a chance to watch the Canada West Championship this upcoming weekend. The four teams involved are the Dinos, University of Victoria, Trinity Western, and the undefeated UBC Thunderbirds.
Yeah, the 14-0 Thunderbirds, who will be quite the task if the Dinos do have to take them on in the final. But in order to qualify for that, they would have to first beat the Victoria Vikes. That game is taking place Friday, so basically today, if you're listening to this on the day we release it, 1 p.m. at McMahon, and then the winner of that will play the winner of the other semifinal matchup between UBC and Trinity Western on Saturday at 4 p.m.
I'm Caden Rogozinski, and this is YYC Soccer Podcast.
So let's go over to Canada West on the men's side, and both the Dinos and the Cougars were involved in playoff action last weekend. And so on Friday evening, Mount Royal played University of Victoria. They were able to pull off the 2-1 victory in overtime. And also on Friday evening, the Dinos played University of Fraser Valley, and it was a goalless draw, and it had to go to PKs. And the Dinos were not victorious. They get knocked out of playoff contention in penalty kicks.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I feel like, heartbreaking exits at the playoffs are almost like a calling card for the Dinos. I don't know how many times they've had those kinds of disappointments in at this stage of the season. They have a lot of bad luck when it comes to the postseason, to be honest. I thought they were going to win this one. Disappointed to see that they weren't able to advance, but when it comes to penalty kicks, it really is a coin toss sometimes. For it being their first year under a new head coach, that being Ramon Mifflin, I mean, really impressive season I felt from the Dinos. I thought they looked really good in some of the games that I saw and the highlights that I saw on their social media.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they're a team on the rise for sure.
And then on the other side of the city, the Mount Royal University Cougars, they had more success in their playoffs. They, as you mentioned, they beat UVic with a goal in extra time on Friday, and to advance to play divisional leader University of Alberta. And they managed to win that one 1-0. So as a result, they have advanced to the Canada West Final, which is taking place tonight, Friday, in Vancouver at 8 p.m.
It turned out that, the Cougars had, I think, kind of a bit of an uneven regular season. They, it was not dominant. How about that? There were some draws and they didn't really assert themselves strongly during the regular season, but when it came right down to it, look, here they are. They're in the Canada West Final again.
Yeah, a little bit of Forge FC magic dust sprinkled on them in this playoff run. But no, I mean, you were right. They drew a lot of games in the regular season and not able to win or be as dominant as they were last year. So they only finished third, and they had the harder route probably to advance to this Canada West Final. But they managed to get it done. They beat Golden Bears, who are a really strong team this season. Obviously, it's going to be really tough to beat UBC in Vancouver. Last year, they had home field advantage in the Canada West Final. So a tough matchup coming up tonight. Fortunately, though, the Cougars, as a result of finishing in the top two, already advanced to the national championships.
Obviously winning Canada West would be, pretty great, but the ticket to the dance, the big dance has already been, they've already received it. So yeah, it's, the hopes for a national championship are still in place for sure.
Yeah, and several episodes back, we interviewed the Cougars captain, Caden Rogozinski, and asked him about, what would a successful season this year look like, considering you won the Canada West title last year and some of your, key players have moved on. And he said, you know what, we still want to win nationals. And that's what they weren't able to achieve last time around. So very curious to see. I mean, can they keep this great streak going? How will they fare against some of the top teams from, Ontario, Quebec, East Coast, etc.? It's not going to be easy at all.
Hi, this is Natalie Gervitz, and you're listening to YYC Soccer Podcast.
Now it's time to talk some ACAC, and we'll talk about State Trojans, both the men's and women's team. We'll start with the women's team. They were undefeated going into the playoffs, and they started off the playoff round. They played on last Saturday against Keanu, and they were able to beat them 1-0 in overtime. But then on Sunday, we had the big matchup, first in the north and first in the south. State had to play Concordia University of Edmonton, and they weren't able to pull it out. They lost that match 2-1.
Yeah, kind of surprised to see this flash across my Twitter feed on Sunday, considering how good the Trojans were all year. As a result of this loss, they don't retain their ACAC conference title. It looks like it took until the playoffs, but the Trojans finally got some really tough matchups this past weekend, especially when you consider that game against Keanu on Saturday would have finished goalless because it went to extra time, obviously.
Yeah. It does seem like they had a couple of tough matches there. But yeah, I think obviously I'm sure there's a lot of disappointment there, but team accomplished quite a bit. Overall, I noticed that the Women's Player of the Year for the South Division was Megan Weeb, who we had on the podcast last year. She had another a pretty great year with the Trojans. So, and the Coach of the Year for the South was John Talerico, State coach. So overall, there was a lot of positives probably to take from the season.
Yeah, definitely, and I imagine they'll be just as good next year, if considering they'll probably retain a lot of the players. And then on the men's side, the State Trojans had to play one playoff game more than the women did. They started their postseason push with a pretty one-sided 5-1 win over Northwest Polytechnic. I believe that team is out of Grand Prairie. They followed that up the very next day. Maybe had some bus legs, but they lost 3-2 to Nate Ooks in extra time, which put them in the bronze medal match against Red Deer Kings, which they managed to come out on top of with the 2-1 win.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links on our website, so you can buy Scott's book on Calgary soccer history. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media, such as Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.